this computer. Recording. Beautiful. Okay, so for Syracuse University, I'm Vincent Zakian. I'm talking to Joe Pantorno, who I worked with over the summer at AM New York. Um, Joe, thanks for the time.
Of course,
Um,
Vincent. Thanks so much for having me.
um, so you're at AM New York now, but can you tell me where you kind of started after you graduated from Hofstra, where you went after that, and then kind of what got you to AM New York now?
Yeah. So obviously the sports journal is definitely difficult to break into. So when I graduated college with my shiny diploma, and you get out into the real world and realize that there's a shortage of jobs,
Hmm.
you kind of have to level with yourself and realize that you can't be too proud and you can't say no to many opportunities where you can get a byline or two. So as I was flipping burgers at one of the beaches on Long Island or working in a warehouse that was making displays for makeup companies, I was freelancing for a string service, which at the time was called the Sports Exchange. I don't think they're around anymore, but they had an exclusive deal with Yahoo Sports. So my first kind of real gig out of college was covering the Brooklyn Nets for this wire service. Basically, you'd write your gamers or your features or your news, and it was made available to any newspaper around the country that had a deal with the Sports Exchange, and they could feature it in their publication. So I did that for a few years, and obviously I was, freelancing when I could,
Hmm.
and even blogging when I could. And it wasn't until 2 years after I graduated, I got my first full time job in the business. I was hired as a breaking news writer for Bleacher Report, which might sound fancy, but it's really nothing more than aggregating other people's reports and writing it up for Bleacher Report. It's sort of the backbone of that site. Um, it's as why it's why they're as big as they are today, because they have a lot of people that can churn out content really quick, uh, and they're amongst the first to run these stories after other reporters actually break the news. So I was there for 2 years, and unfortunately, which I hope none of you guys will ever have to experience ever in your lives, uh, they had massive layoffs, which again is just sort of the nature of the journalism business.
Hmm.
And I was kind of low man on the totem pole at the time. I was 20, I want to say 24 or 25 at the time. So unfortunately, I was shown the door, and I resume bombed at basically as many places as I possibly could to try and get my name out there. And luckily, I caught the attention of a free daily newspaper in New York City. It was called Metro at the time, and I was there for 2 years. They started their sports department with me, and I sort of ran their sports page for 2 or 3 years, and they were bought by Schneps Media and merged with AM New York, and that's where I am now.
So, has covering sports changed since you started, do you think? Is it different now?
Uh, yeah, which is weird because I feel like I haven't been here for that long
Mhm.
covering sports, but then you come to the realization that it's been 10 years or so. But I mean, it certainly has. It's obviously the social media aspect of it all has provided a different dimension. And while it was important when I was first starting out to sort of magnify your work, it's really changed in terms of Twitter, or I guess it's X now, sort of being the place where that's where you sort of break news, and there's this entire creative aspect that sort of complements the sort of meat and potatoes version of sports reporting. It's not just you know okay, you reported a story. It's is somebody there also shooting video to provide that aspect.
Yeah.
um, Attention spans have obviously shortened as time goes on. So, you're a really good writer if you can hold somebody's attention for three, four, 500 words. It's, is there a secondary aspect that can kind of keep them looking at your work for longer or at all in that regard? So that's probably been one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my professional career, especially because when I was coming up in college, again, it doesn't feel that long ago. I graduated in 2013, but being able to major in print journalism was still an option, and that was one that I took. So obviously, as college was going, the landscape was sort of changing before our eyes. So we sort of had to learn on the fly. And I even think my professors also sort of had to learn on the fly in terms of teaching us too. So it's definitely still a challenge, but one that provides a little more fun for us.
Yeah. That's actually funny you mentioned that. We just at Syracuse, they just announced like starting next year they're merging our print and broadcast major. So it's just gonna be like
Wow.
all one like multimedia journalism major. Um,
Yeah.
which is like I mean at Syracuse that's like a huge deal because it's big
Right.
journalism over here. And a lot of people's like degrees are contingent on that. Anyway, um what about like in college like did you consider doing anything else where you were just so focused on being a sports reporter or was there people like test out all kinds of different like career paths in college, but it was one focus?
Yes. So, you know, in high school, I mean, and a lot of us, it's not, specific to me per se, but I was that one kid who was like the fountain of useless information when it came to sports knowledge. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when you're 12 or 13 or 14 and you come to the realization that you're not going to be able to play first base for the New York Mets, in your lifetime, you're sort of looking for different avenues. How can I stay connected to sports? How can I make my passion a career?
Yeah.
And I always thought it was special to be able to inform and educate people and sports fans with something they might not know, or have them learn something about their favorite player that they might have never knew before. So that was something that always intrigued me, and I didn't really come to that conclusion until I was probably a junior in high school, where I joined my school paper and I wrote something about the Mets and Yankees, and my high school teacher, who I will always credit for is the reason why I'm still in this business today. She read it, didn't know much about sports, and she said, "Listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I never, I didn't understand a single word that you wrote or what you're writing about, but you made me want to keep reading it." And that was sort of that moment where it's like, all right, full steam ahead.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do with my life. And I think I was sort of stubborn to a fault. My first journalism class in college, my professor walks in and he goes, "So you want to be a journalist, which means you don't care about, money, salary, or comfort of living." So, I think he tried to just kind of scare a few of us away. But sometimes you have to be stubborn to get to where you want to go. And I'm glad I was as stubborn as I was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I've had kind of a similar I like wrote for my paper in high school and I did all that. And like I had
Nice.
an English teacher or like a journalism teacher who like in high school who like got me like to be like
It's
it's always a high school teacher.
yeah, it's amazing what one good teacher can do for you, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's very true. Um, you mentioned like you feel like you get a lot out of like informing people and like telling them something they might not know. Do you ever like want to give your own opinion in your writing?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And thankfully sometimes that's what columns are for.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to kind of have that platform when I do want to give my opinion, but in a way, that raw opinion does have to be censored in a way because I do have relationships with a lot of the pro sports teams here in New York. And
Yeah.
if I were to, you know, sometimes speak my mind or speak the mind of a fan who wants to eviscerate the team's owner per se, or talk about how bad the manager is. You sort of have to toe that line of maybe going too overboard, because obviously your career longevity is sort of um, thrown into question there. And I'll give an example, and it was during COVID, and I'm not I'm the not the first of the tons of people who have done it, but I wrote a column kind of going after James Dolan, how he has mismanaged the Knicks for the last 2.5 decades, and lucky for him, he kind of fell into competent leadership and now is on the cusp of actually having a sustainable and winning team. But I kind of was 20 years at the time, and I got an email from Madison Square Garden Entertainment and the Knicks, basically, sort of threatening us to take it down, or else they'll pull our credentials, or which I mean, in general, if you get the attention of the team or the person that you're writing about, maybe you're doing a semi good job.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, it's also something to consider if you want to stay in this business for a long time and you want to have the access to the teams that you cover. It's a certain line that you have to learn to toe of being critical, but also not being belligerent.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's important. I just have like one more question, but and then we can get out of here. Um, have you had like I mean, you mentioned that run-in with the Nets, but like, have you had an in-person confrontation with like a player or a coach about something you wrote or said? I mean, you're in the locker rooms all the time, you know. You kind of know them.
Sure. Not really. There were a couple of things. People who work in public relations who wrote the images of their players, or their coaches, or there's a quote that might have been a little too harsh coming from them that you run, and they try to backtrack it. So there is one from last year where um, I don't know how many hockey fans there are out there, but I was talking to Matthew Barzal about how he was kind of put on this carousel. He was playing left wing and playing right wing when he was the natural center, and he didn't have a bona fide third member of his line alongside Bo Horvat. So he kind of said something along those lines in as many words, and obviously you write it, and then the next day, I guess the team's general manager Lou Lamoriello, who again, if hockey fans are familiar with him, runs a pretty tight ship. So I think he got the ear of the head of PR, and he tried to, while I was in the locker room, he kind of pulled me aside and tried to make me backtrack somebody else's quote, which obviously I wasn't going to do. But it's important to be receptive regardless. And however, you can't minimize somebody else's feelings, obviously. So it's important in a situation like that where I actually went to Barzal and I pulled him aside and I said, listen, like, if you have any issue with anything that I write, like, feel free to come find me and talk to me about it or whatever. And that's really anybody who I've ever talked to. That's kind of been my mantra. And it's not me saying, okay, come talk to me and I'm going to change what I write. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. It's just, if we want to have a healthy working relationship, we kind of talk these things out. So I've been very lucky in the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this where I haven't really had a really kind of tough run in. I've never really been chewed out by anybody. So that at least is, I guess that's good for me. Again, depends on
Yeah, I
what
think it's
you're looking for in this business, though.
yeah, true. I guess some guys are looking for it.